Hello, everybody. My name is Arjun Dev Arora, and I am the founder and managing partner of Valence Advisory. We support founders and funders and help accelerate their efforts via people, strategy, and capital. And now off to John.
Hello, John Lowe here. I am the leadership coaching lead and the communications lead at Valence Advisory, working alongside Arjun. And enough about me, because today's guest is Clay Whitehead. He's the founder and managing partner of Pomegranate VC. Now, Clay was not a VC his entire life. He was also a founder before this. And so I'll let him do the talking. So Clay, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your professional journey from founder to investor?
Well, thanks so much for having me, guys. It's good to be talking to you here. Really, the journey started a long time ago. I've worn two hats since about 2007. Started in venture at Venrock, had a great experience there. Moved to the operating side and started my own company called Presence Learning. And I knew how hard it would be to start a company going in, and I knew it would take a lot of time to build something at the scale I hoped to do. And so I really focused on something that I loved and something that was personal to me, which was my own experience growing up with ADHD and learning disabilities. So we set up a telemedicine marketplace that focused on therapies like mental health therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy for kids and teens who have mental health issues, things like anxiety and autism and depression, and also special needs issues. So I was very fortunate to run a company that was meaningful to me personally, had a huge impact on the lives of literally just millions and millions of sessions with kids. Grew that company to be about 1,000 people. We actually just raised our Series D, which was very exciting. I stepped away about a year and a half ago to focus on investing, which I've been doing continuously while I was wearing the CEO hat at Presence. And it's really a lot of those experiences as a founder and CEO going through the process of scaling a company that got me more excited about investing and made me, I think, really informed what I do today.
Thank you. And can you unpack a bit of some of those things that you experienced in the process as a founder that inspired you to become an investor in VC today? It must be numerous things, right? From the people and from the strategy and from understanding capital. I think that'd be something that founders watching this video would find extremely informative.
Yeah, of course. I mean, just for me personally, the one of the most rewarding experiences of running a company was the time I had with other CEOs, be it in a great coaching organization I was in called 10X CEO or in YPO. I really felt like I found my tribe with other founders. I love those conversations. And what I loved most was this feeling of the shared experiences you have starting something and the unique ability that gives you as a group to hold each other accountable and push each other and be in productive tensions with each other that, you're pushing the other CEO, but you're also doing that to help them. You're saying you can ask questions like, hey, is everyone in your organization really clear on what the strategy is? Does everyone know the metrics that they're accountable for all the way down and how their job moves those things forward? Well, whatever the question is, I just love those types of relationships and went really deep on those, worked with a lot of great companies. And a lot of that combined with my own experience managing my own board and my own company are really what's excite me about the investing side. So one big lesson that I learned is, hey, the board is not your boss. I was a first-time founder, and I think made that mistake several times, to be frank. Thinking in that frame instead of, gosh, what really is the market that we're focused on? Who is the customer? How are we engaging them? How are we, creating something that they need and something that's valuable to them? Like those are the first principles questions you got to be focused on. And when you get in a boardroom with all these really impressive people who you've, hand selected through competitive rounds and because you deeply respect them, it's easy to stray from your convictions, right? Because here are very impressive people that you respect, sometimes putting out ideas that can really distract you. So that doesn't mean, they are great advisors and counselors in other ways, but it's just how you receive that advice that is the issue for the CEO. And that's something I talk with a lot of CEOs about. And one thing I try and make sure that they're really staying true to the first principles thing that matter. I think another thing that for me, I learned, and I was CEO for 9, almost 10 years, is I really started out solely focused on just growing revenues, keeping costs at a reasonable level, really just managing to the income statement. And then over time, leveraging products like venture debt, and there's even more sophisticated products out there, like things you'll hear, equity like debt. There's just all this innovation out there that can really help you do some powerful things with your company and minimize dilution. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with founders where they're taking an extra 10 points of dilution to do, manage inventory or whatever it is that they're doing instead of their balance sheet, right? Instead of really understanding how to leverage their working capital, really understanding what the right amount of debt is, really understanding what the right types of debt products or non-interest liabilities are that are their leverage for driving their business. And then, one thing that I think is new to the ecosystem that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and involvement too is just cap table management. The venture ecosystem has really, really changed dramatically over the past, 3 years, 5 years, whatever time frame you want to look at it, it's continually changed. And one of the biggest changes is that it's no longer your Series A investor who anchors your cap table from start to IPO. There's a bunch of specialist firms out there who have incredible expertise that can help you in different ways. And part of the dance these days is strategically getting investors in at the right time and using your cap table to get those people in, and where if you need to get old investors who may not be adding as much value as they used to, maybe they're have a different vision than you as the company has grown. The cap table is really a tool for A, creating value, and B, aligning incentives. And I think founders need to have a strategy for that as their company grows, every much as they need a strategy around revenue growth.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really, really important point. Glad you shared it.
Yeah, thank you. And can you perhaps give us some examples of how this understanding of what you can do with capital and your cap table, how have you or some of the founders you've worked with use this to their benefit, and to do it arguably at a speed and flexibility they might not have perceived possible before?
Yeah, well, first, I think there's some positive trends in the ecosystem. A lot of people for a long time have viewed equity compensation as the sole lever for driving retention and alignment for executives and employees. And that's changed a lot. If you're going for a big win now, a lot of later stage investors have realized and are starting to prioritize aligning themselves better with founders by giving the founder some liquidity. You aren't aligned with your investors as a founder if they're aligned around a multi-billion-dollar exit and you're just making a relatively low salary and have this paper wealth. If you're going to be aligned in shooting for a big target, an ambitious target, which is what it's all about, you got to be able to take some chips off the table. So I think that's a really important point here. I think the other thing that's important when you think about managing the balance sheet and the changing ecosystem that we have is, for most companies I speak with and have interacted with, one of the biggest constraints they have is oftentimes simply engineering hiring and scaling their engine product teams. And one of the common frustrations is obviously, Google, Facebook, you name the big guys, they've essentially become talent monopsonies. So they've essentially become, monopolies on the buying side, on the demand side for talent. And you lose out to them on cash and on equity. But by structuring intelligent liquidity programs for your employees, you can make your stock more valuable to your employees, and you can even have more of a retention impact and a recruiting impact if it's done as part of a holistic employee engagement strategy. And if you aren't giving away the farm, right? You probably only want to allow people to sell 10-ish%, some percent of their shares each year. In terms of more strategically using your balance sheet, I think one important point that a lot of people overlook is the checks these days from investors need to be so large at the later stage that you often need an early stage investor to be willing to sell some of their shares to bring a large check in to support the company. So I had this as a CEO. We really only needed to raise 25 million. An investor wanted to put in 50 million. That's a very common scenario. The common way to solve that is have an earlier investor sell some of their shares. So one thing I'd encourage founders for is have these conversations about the cap table. Start with a strategy around your cap table, right? Realize how you're going to have to manage it over time. who you want on the bus at different times, at different stages, and be talking to people about that up front so that when the time comes and you're raising your series B, C, or D, you have people who might be willing to help you make room, people who understand you might need to use liquidity programs for your employees, be in a talent and engagement sense, and really drive the outcomes that you want with your most valuable commodity, which is your equity.
Thanks for sharing that, Clay. And just in the interest of time, I want to give you an opportunity to also talk a bit more about Pomegranate VC, because my understanding is a lot of what you've shared about founders and how they can actually leverage their understanding of capital and instruments to enable their company better. I understand that's a lot of what the value is that you bring within Pomegranate VC. And I just want to give you an opportunity to talk through that and how that works, and, you know, your motivational driver for why you're so passionate about, you know, getting your service and offering out to the world.
No, I think I appreciate that. I'll try and avoid the infomercial, but I definitely appreciate the softball there. In terms of, look, you know, my why here is just all the experiences seared in me over basically a decade of running a company. It becomes your passion. It becomes, you know, just a part of you. It's something tattooed on your skin for life if you're a founder. And I've been through, like a lot of founders, I've been through hypergrowth, I've been through layoffs, I've been through great times, I've been through tough times, and it's become my core identity. So for me, transitioning into working with other CEOs, and they don't always need help, right? Sometimes they just need people to get out of their way and provide resources too, right? I certainly felt that way a lot of the time. But where needed, it's about having people around you that can play that role and help you unlock value, which may come in the form of something in your business, or it may come from your own personal development. I think is the really secret back pocket ace of most great CEOs. Despite some of the lessons of The Last Dance, which a lot of us are watching about Michael Jordan, I think it's really fundamentally about, hey, how are we going to be leaders? How are we going to be a member of our first team and not just the leader of it? Because ultimately everything we achieve through our in our companies, we achieve through our executive teams and those around us. So look, the type of CEOs I love working with and the things that I think are exciting when you can start them getting going in a company is, you know, first and foremost, realize that, hey, you know what? The big jobs you've got are having a really high functioning executive team and making your company a great place to work. And that the things that you love doing, the things that you're functionally strong at and your own passions should probably only be about 10% of your time, most of the time. Because you're, you know, just like you don't win as a CEO, you don't win when you win arguments, you know, you win when the best decision is made, right? It's much that way in how the work gets done and how the decisions get made. And I think right now, particularly with COVID, a lot of these things are very relevant. So some of the things, just to share my thinking recently. So one thing I've been talking about is endurance versus resilience. Like I hear a lot of people talking about, hey, we just need to endure. And I know what they mean, but it's just the wrong word because we're going to have to change. It's just not a matter of keeping on running the same race. Resilience is much more apt because it's about getting back up as soon as you can. And you can also make your team stronger if that's a message that you're preaching, helping them reconnect with the mission, helping them reconnect with each other, helping them find meaning in their work as you go along and make a lot of these painful changes. Another thing I'm talking about with a lot of CEOs recently is just, and I'm hearing from them, is they feel the need to be more directive as wartime CEOs now. Everyone feels like a wartime CEO. And just a few sort of tactical tips and tricks around that are, number one, remember that you're always CEO. And this is a time of massive change. But if you go around and brainstorm throughout your company, all of a sudden, all these loose ideas you're having and this brainstorming you're doing will turn into action. Sometimes as CEO, we don't realize the power of our voice, and that can divide our company's focus. So remember that you're always CEO. One way to do that is to be very explicit. It's a bit awkward at first, but be very explicit with people, whether you are telling them to do something, selling them on something, informing them of it, just like, hey, here's what's happening, or consulting them on it. So we really want their input. And similarly, when you're making decisions, I think it's very good hygiene to say, as CEO, here's the type of decision we're going to make. It's going to be a me decision, it's going to be a consensus decision, or it's going to be a delegated decisions. There's lots of other things and tools that you can use right now. But overall, I think CEOs just have to be frank that we're going to be changing in front of people on the spot as we adjust to COVID, both in terms of perhaps our strategy, perhaps some of our tactics, but most likely also in terms of how we manage the company. So calling that out, asking people to hold you to account to the values of the company still, but being open in these transitions you're making as a leader yourself.
Thank you. I think that's a great place to leave the mic on the table. Thanks for sharing, Clay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your insights.